Praise the Lord, and please sit down. And if you're watching in the chalets right now, we warmly welcome you and hope you're enjoying our time of worship together. Hope you're experiencing God's presence with you, just as we're experiencing Him here in the top with us. Our reading tonight is taken from 1 Kings and chapter 17. It's an incident in the life of Elijah that I think of as the hidden ministry. And you know, I couldn't help thinking as I was reading it through beforehand, that isn't it just typical of Jesus, that it's this one incident that Jesus refers to in the life of Elijah. The only incident he highlights is this one, which is part of the hidden ministry, not the mountaintop, but in an obscure town called Zaraphath, and a quiet ministry. And even then when Jesus tells the story, he focuses on the widow in the story more than Elijah. But anyway, here's the story. Then the word of the Lord came to Elijah, saying, "Go now to Zaraphath, which belongs to Sidon, and live there, for I have commanded a widow there to feed you." So he set out and went to Zaraphath. When he came to the gate of the town, a widow was there gathering sticks. He called to her and said, "Bring me a little water in a vessel so that I may drink." And as she was going to bring it, he called to her and said, "Bring me a morsel of bread in your hand." But she said, "As the Lord your God lives, I have nothing baked, only a handful of meal in a jar and a little oil in a jug, and I'm now gathering a couple of sticks so that I may go home and prepare it for myself and my son, that we may eat it and die." Elijah said to her, "Don't be afraid. Go and do as you've said, but first make me a little cake of it and bring it to me. And afterwards make something for yourself and your son. For thus says the Lord, the God of Israel, the jar of meal will not be emptied, and the jug of oil will not fail, until the day that the Lord sends rain on the earth." She went and did as Elijah said, so that she, as well as he and her household, ate for many days. And the jar of meal was not emptied, neither did the jug of oil fail, according to the word of the Lord that he spoke by Elijah. But after this, the son of the woman, the mistress of the house, became ill, and his illness was so severe that there was no breath left in him. She then said to Elijah, "What have you against me, O man of God? You've come to me to bring my sin to remembrance, and to cause the death of my son." But he said to her, "Give me your son." He took him from her bosom, carried him up into the upper chamber where he was lodging, and laid him on his own bed. And he cried out to the Lord, "O Lord my God, have you brought calamity even upon the widow with whom I'm staying by killing her son?" Then he stretched himself upon the child 3 times, and he cried out to the Lord, "O Lord my God, let this child's life come into him again." And the Lord listened to the voice of Elijah. The life of the child came into him again, and he revived. And Elijah took the child, brought him down from the upper chamber into the house, and gave him to his mother. Then Elijah said, "See, your son is alive." So the woman said to Elijah, "Now I know that you're a man of God, and that the word of the Lord in your mouth is truth." Isn't God wonderful? It's a great privilege for me now to welcome our speaker for this evening. Rob Parsons and his wife Diane have been good friends of Roger and myself for a number of years now, and we are very privileged to know them. Rob is a lawyer. He is currently Executive Director of Care for the Family, and as many of you will know, he is the author of a number of books. Many of you will know the book called A 60-Minute Father, and the latest book, What They Didn't Teach Me in Sunday School. His wife Diane, I know, has a real burden for prayer and has a heart to pray, particularly for young people. I want to welcome Rob to our platform tonight, and we know that the Lord is going to bring his message to us through Rob. So would you give him a very warm welcome? Thank you, Rob.
Thank you very much. The other day, Diane and I went to an architectural reclamation depot. That's a scrapyard for houses. It was a fascinating place. Piles of stained glass windows, old fireplaces, wonderful wood, old garden furniture. And then we came around a corner to a big shed that was full of old front doors. Big doors from mansions and tiny doors from small terraced houses. Red doors and blue doors and yellow doors and doors with huge hinges and damaged doors and perfect doors. And every one of them with a little hole where once a key had fitted. And as I looked at all those doors, I wondered what stories those doors could tell. What had gone on behind them? What joy, what triumphs, what fears, what disasters had lurked behind those front doors? Had those doors ever been opened in anticipation by a small child? Had they ever been slammed shut in anger? What stories had those doors known? And sometime way in the future, a young couple will walk around an architectural reclamation depot, and our door, my door, Diane's door, will be there. And your door will be there. What stories will those doors tell? Well, none, thank goodness. But if they could, oh, those doors. And tonight you and I go behind the front door of a family. We know so little about this family, except it seems like our home. It's at times a place of worry, a place of joy, a place of peace, a place of fear, a place of triumph, a place of disappointment. It's a family. It's like your home and my home. And our first introduction is of a woman gathering sticks. There's so much we don't know about this woman. We don't know how old she is, but we do know this is a poor woman, and she's a single-parent mum. She's a widow. She has a son, probably an only son. And the writer to Kings is about to take us behind the door of this little family and into one of the most amazing stories in the whole of the Bible. This is a fascinating book. I'm afraid we have become used to it. We have read these stories at Sunday school. We have lost their incredible power. You know, when I was a kid, one of the Sunday newspapers used to have a little advertising slogan, and it was this: all human life is here. Do you remember what newspaper that used to advertise? News of the World. All human life wasn't exactly there, but certainly some of it was. I'll tell you, all human life is in this book. Incredible stories. And I am staggered as I see its honesty. Time and time and time again. This book understands men and it understands women. Dan and I spent a lot of our life in the world of marriage breakup and affairs and broken homes. And I tell you, this book understands people. Sometimes I smile as I read it. This book has an incredible way sometimes of understating things. I mean, think of today. Think of the resurrection. The disciples, they've lost Jesus. He's dead. They're devastated. And in the words of the Authorized Version, Jesus alive comes to them. And it says in that incredibly understating way, then were the disciples glad when they saw the Lord. And I was reading the other day in the book of Esther, and I came across another wonderful piece of understatement which just put an incredible light on human character. Let me read you what I read the other day. The king has dismissed his wife. She has displeased him. And the book of Esther says this: then the king's personal attendant said to the king, let a new queen be found. Let a search be made for beautiful young virgins for the king. Let the king appoint commissioners in every province of his realm to bring all the beautiful girls into his harem. Let them be placed under the care of the king's eunuch, and let beauty treatments be given to them. And then let the girl who pleases the king be queen instead of Vashti. Then the Bible says this: this advice appealed to the king. It is a quite incredible book. And here's this single-parent mom, and she's gathering sticks. I will never forget a single-parent mom I met years ago. Josh McDowell and I were running a seminar called How to Help Your Teens Avoid Sexual Pressure. And Josh was talking about something that he calls the dad difference, the difference a father can make to a girl's life. And in the interval, I'm down there somewhere just at the foot of the stage, and a young single-parent mum comes up to me. She is in floods of tears. She says, I believe all this, but there's no man in my home. There's no man for my kids. What difference can I make? Will my kids' lives end in disaster? And I put my arm around her, and I said, I sense you are a fantastic mother. And I'll bet your son loves you, doesn't he? She said, yes, I think he really loves me. And I encouraged her, and she wiped her tears away, and she went out. And sometime later, she wrote me a letter. She said, I've never spoken in public before, but when I got back to our church, they asked me to run a little seminar on your seminar. And she said, I stood up trembling to give it, How to Help Your Kids Avoid Sexual Pressure. And as I'm giving it, I notice my boy come in at the back. And he stands and he listens, and at the end he runs up to me and says, Mom, you were fantastic. You were fantastic. And that lone parent mum put in my heart that day a care for the single-parent mum, the single-parent dad that has never left me. Being a single-parent mum, as this widow was, a lone-parent dad is the toughest job on the face of the earth. And it's hard because all of the issues you face alone. Big and small. If the sink is blocked, you face it alone. A letter from the bank manager, a lump in the breast, a baby that won't sleep, a washing machine that's flooding the floor, a kid experimenting with drugs, a teenager staying out too late, a 10-year-old being bullied, a car that won't start. You lie awake at night worrying, and you worry alone. You just don't know whether the difficulties you're experiencing are normal. Does every household go through this? Or is it just because there's no mum, no dad? At times you are fit to burst. You spend half your life worrying about what has happened and the other half worrying about what might happen. And you know, we're all used to the saying, a trouble shared is a trouble halved. Boy, did that come home to me the other night. My boy's 17 now, my girl's 21, but when Lloyd was almost 16, Diane was away, and I was waiting up for Lloyd to come home. Now, he's pretty good normally, but this night he was just pushing those boundaries a little. And 11 o'clock came and went, and 10 past came and went, and quarter past. And you've been there, haven't you, some of you parents? You know what it's like, don't you? You wait, and then you make a cup of tea, and then you pray, and then you pray a bit more. And then you think, oh, this is silly. Pull yourself together. And then you remember what you were like as a teenager. And so you pray some more. And then you wander around a bit and you make another cup of tea and then you pull yourself together. And all of a sudden, you descend into an incredible spiral of anxiety. Your mind just runs away with you. You can see policing legions coming up the front drive. And when they do come home, you don't know whether to ground them for 17 years or give them a rise in pocket money. You are so glad to see them. And as I was there that night, it struck me, every lone parent mom, every single parent dad faces this day in, day out, month in, month out, all through the toddlers, all through the teens, alone. You know, we simply have to stand by the lone parent mom or dad. You may be a grandparent, your kids are grown and gone. Get behind a lone parent mom or dad in your church. Help them if you can. You may be a single person. You know, many single people or couples who cannot have children of their own actually have hundreds of children. You may be a single person. You've got to get alongside that single parent mom and dad, give them some help, some support. This woman had lost her husband, and the boy had lost his dad. And when Elijah saw her, she was gathering sticks. It's a pretty normal thing to do, but nobody knew the ache in this woman's heart. She was consumed with worry for her family. One of the first things Elijah said to her was, "Don't be afraid." Now, I've not counted it to check, but someone told me the other day, the Bible says, "Don't be afraid," 366 times. It's one for every day of the year, plus leap year. Don't be afraid. And for this dear single-parent mom, it was the fear of not being able to provide for a family. But you know, whether we're two parents, single-parent mom or dad, single-person grandparent, we've all known fears for our family. If we're single, we may worry about our parents. You know, the fascinating thing about getting older is you observe that the child becomes the parent and the parent becomes the child. The other day, I'm going across the road with Katie, and she pulls me back and says, "Daddy, wait for the green man." You know, my dad died about 4 or 5 years ago, and almost 90 years old. Never told me he loved me, never hugged me. I'm sure he did, but he found those things hard to say. I'm sure he did love me. Not an emotional man. But I can remember going into his room in the hospital, and as I left him, he said, "Oh, Rob, leave the door open, would you, and leave the light on outside." Boy, I used to say that to my dad when I was 4 or 5 years old. And the child is becoming the father, and the father's becoming the child. My dear mum is almost 90 years old as well, and I go to her the other day, and I have to help her off the toilet. And I have to pull my own mum's pants up. I'd never seen my mum's bottom the whole of my life. At least I couldn't remember seeing it. And I'm pulling my mum's pants up as she used to pull mine up when I was a little boy, just off the toilet. And the child has become the mother, and the mother has become the child. And some of you are worried for your parents. This is not just a thing for parents and children. You are worried. It is a family fear. And if your parents here today, you're worried about your kids, we have basically 5 basic fears for our children. Number 1, that they will make a life-dominating mistake. They'll never recover from it. Secondly, they won't turn out right. Third, we're failing as a family. Fourth, we're scared they'll suffer a serious accident. 5, our children won't live out our values and faith. Almost every one of us has those 5 fears in some way. They can paralyze us. They can make us like a rabbit in front of the headlights of a car. We're so scared, our fears run away with us. We be consumed, some of us, with fears for our children. This woman was afraid, but she also felt guilty. You know, I sense in this woman a kind of sigh. Don't you sense another kind of sigh as she's gathering these sticks? Why couldn't I do better for my family? Why couldn't I look after my boy better? I sense in this woman a kind of guilt. Some of you parents are guilty today for a whole bunch of reasons. You feel you may have let your children down. You know, we care so much because we love so much. There's hardly a parent on the face of the earth who wouldn't love another run at it. I think people think because Dan and I write books on family life, we have no regrets. I would love to have another run at parenthood. And some of you are carrying a guilt you have no right to carry. Some of you have guilt because of prodigals. Your kids have left the faith, they've gone away. You've thought, how did it happen? You have 2 children. You did exactly the same with the second as you did with the first. But the second one tested you at every turn, broke your heart, and is away somewhere now. You look at other people's kids, they don't seem to have cared as much as you. They may not have prayed as much as you. Frankly, they don't seem to be as good parents as you have tried to be. But their kids are fine. You're saying, how did it happen? I want to release some of you tonight from that kind of guilt. You must remember this. Adam and Eve had the perfect father and the perfect environment but they went away their father didn't want them to go. In this task of parenting, there are no guarantees. And no, there's that lovely verse in Proverbs, bring up a child in the way he should go, and when he's old he won't depart from it. That's not a guarantee, it's a general principle. There are no guarantees. And some of you are kind of guilt you have no right to carry. That's not to say some of us wouldn't like another run at it, but you have no right to carry that guilt, and you should be free of it. But we want these prodigals home. About 5 weeks ago, Diane and I were involved in one of the most significant days of our life. I was invited to speak at the National Exhibition Center at something called Prayer for Revival, bringing home the prodigals. Whole day of prayer for the prodigals of our nation. And they erected a huge cross in the corner, and they invited people to put the names of their prodigals on a piece of paper, put it just at the foot of the cross. Husbands, wives, friends, and children. And they asked those of us who were speaking to leave the platform occasionally, come down and pray with people at the foot of the cross. About an hour into the program, I think I better do my duty, and I leave the podium and come to the foot of the cross. And when I get there, it is laden with thousands of kids' names. And I look at the names, and I begin to cry. I'm no good to anybody. I don't pray with anybody. I just sit at the foot of that cross, and I cry like a baby. I got 2 kids. I am holding my breath for those children. Who knows how they'll turn out? I am holding my breath for Katie and Lloyd. I pray for them day in, day out. But it's not just them. Diane and I have a heart for the kids of our nation. I wept for those kids, and some of you are crying for your prodigals. We need to bring home the prodigals. But you know, we need to ask ourselves some big questions. We need to ask ourselves, what kind of a local church are we trying to bring them home to? If you and I are bringing our kids home to a local church that is bitter and divided and squabbling, there's hardly any point bringing them home. You know the problem with many of our churches? Half the prodigals are in the pews, but they don't realize they've gone. Take a situation. A man has 2 children, boy and a girl, and the boy leaves home, he kicks the traces. You sense he's not so much turned his back on the Lord as he couldn't stand church anymore. Got a ring in his ear, got pink hair, works day after day with homeless people. Daughter stays in the church. She's now 40 years old. She is bitter. She is unforgiving. She will not have a minute's grace in her life. She causes the pastor endless problems. She never misses a meeting. Who's the prodigal? Truth is, both are, and both need to come home. Do you know what Paul Cain prophesied some years ago? When the Father's house is filled with the Father's love, the prodigals will come home. When the Father's house is filled with the Father's love, the prodigals will come home. How will we know when they've come home? How will we judge when they come home? Will we say to them, you can't come home with your pink hair, and you can't come home with your earring, and you can't come home with a cigarette in your mouth? Or will we say to God, God, will you tell us what it means for these kids to come home? And God, will you show us what really matters to you? Half of them haven't turned their back on Jesus. They've turned their back on us, their local church, hassles, regulations, sometimes hypocrisy that drove them away. I pray, God, that when our prodigals come home, they are met by the Father and not by the elder brother. Lord, bring our prodigals home. I can imagine a young prodigal coming home and say, Dad, I'm coming home, but be gentle with me. Be gentle. Give me time to give up the fags, would you? And I may dye my hair black again when I'm 50, but Dad, be gentle with me, won't you? I'm trying to come home. Be gentle with the prodigals. Never stop loving them. Never stop praying. Don't ever give up. Don't give up for your prodigals, will you? Don't ever give up. When I studied English literature, the prof told me the parable of the prodigal son was the greatest short story ever written. She had no faith, she just believed it was true. The boy leaves home, he ends up in a pigsty. For me, nobody tells it in real terms, apart from Jesus, like Yancey in his latest book. Incredible way he tells it. Tells the story of Claire. The father eventually kicks her out, can't stand the pink hair, can't stand the ear stud, can't stand the nose stud. You'll never have that in my home. And she goes as far as she can from her father to Detroit. She's 15, 16 years old, gets off the Greyhound bus and a man meets her, befriends her, and soon she's in a penthouse. And because she's young and because she's a virgin, she gets high prices at first. In fact, for 3 years, this kid lives a life of luxury. And 1 month, 3 years later, she gets ill. And there's not much scope for a girl like that who's ill. And soon the pimp kicks her out, and she's on the streets. She's shivering. She still sleeps with a couple of men a night just to support her drug habit, but she's shivering. She's in newspaper. She would sleep, except you can't sleep on the streets of Detroit as a teenage girl and still be safe. And then her mind goes to home. She remembers first her Labrador. She remembers cherry blossom. She remembers running to the garden. And with all her heart, this kid wants to go home. She rings her mom and dad. She gets the answer phone. She rings second time. She gets the answer phone. And the third time she says, Dad, I'm coming home. I'm going to get on a bus, and if you're not there to meet me, don't worry. I understand if you don't want to come. I'll just stay on the bus to Canada. And she says, as the bus is moving its way through the night, it gets dark, and then it begins to snow. She wonders whether her folks have even got the message. And then the driver says 15 minutes to go to her hometown. 15 minutes. Within 15 minutes, her life will be quite decided. Nothing she dreamt of, nothing she thought of, could have prepared her for the sight she saw when she left that bus in the early hours of that morning and made her way into the clinical concrete of the bus station. There were 40, 50 people there. Grandparents, aunties, friends, mother, father. They had goofy hats on. They were blowing party poppers. And someone had a computer-generated banner that read, "Welcome home, darling." And then she saw him. She saw her father coming out of the crowd. And she moved away towards him and began, "Dad, I am so sorry." "Hush, child," he said. "We don't have time for that. We're going to be late for the party." Some of your prodigals are going to come home. Our prodigals will come home. Don't ever give up. Never, ever give up. Our prodigals are coming home. And if there was fear, and if there was guilt, there was a sense of hopelessness. Nothing can ever change. You know, sometimes we think that, don't we? Nothing can ever change. Somebody gave me a great piece of advice about reading our children's school reports. They said, don't read your kids' school reports as though they're a prophecy of their future lives. Isn't that great? In other words, don't read the score at halftime. Things can change in your family. Maybe a man here, you think your marriage couldn't change, but it can. I was speaking some time ago in Canada. They told me before I began our seminar, the young couple in the front row were about to have a divorce. They'd come to the seminar as their last hope. And as I'm speaking, just where you sat now, I saw him reach across. He took his wife's hand. She looked amazed. She reached out. She clasped his, and they came close. He was reaching out. He was saying, we can begin again. Things can change. That child who is now breaking your heart can change. That prodigal can come home. Wonderful verse tucked away in the heart of the Old Testament. God says, I can give you back the years that the locust has eaten. And then there's that incredible incident with the jar of oil. I believe that single-parent mum, thank God, every day she'd come to the end of her oil and her flour. Tomorrow belongs to those who get to the point where they believe they have nothing left. Tomorrow belongs to those who get to the point where they have nothing left. Tomorrow belongs to those who get to the point when they have nothing left. There is that lovely old hymn, when we get to the end of our hoarded resources, our Father's full giving has only begun. We love to have ample resources. It puts us in control. We love to control ourselves. We like to control our friends. We love to control our church. We love to control God. But there is great danger in this. It is that we feel adequate for the task, more than adequate. Things are going very well, thank you. There is a frightening account at the beginning of Luke's Gospel. Joseph and Mary go several days' journey, and they think that Jesus is with them. But in the AV, it says this: they went on supposing that he was in their company. But they had blasted on, but they'd left Jesus behind somewhere. You can't do that in your own strength. But when we come to the place where we honestly believe we have nothing left, there is great power. You think that tonight, this could be your moment of greatest strength. Nothing left in that little home. Nothing left with regard to my children, only my tears. Nothing left to give with regard to my marriage. Nothing left with regard to my church. Nothing left with regard to the kids I work with. It just may be the time of your greatest strength. It was so with the widow of Zaraphath. But you know what she had to do? She had to do the hardest thing of all. She had to begin. She had to go on a flyer. She had to take a step of faith. She had to bake a loaf of bread. For that moment, she had to put aside the failure of the past, the fear of the future. She had to trust God now. You know, the problem with the kingdom is rarely that we don't have enough resources. That can be a problem, but it is rarely that we don't have enough resources. Much more than that. It is we have not discovered the sheer power when we feel utterly inadequate, totally dependent on God, and we begin to use in that power the few resources we have. Tomorrow belongs to the widow who gave the mite. Tomorrow belongs to the prostitute who washed the feet of Jesus with her tears. Tomorrow belongs to the boy who brought his lunch to the master and saw him break it to the crowd. And tomorrow belongs to the widow who in faith began and baked a loaf of bread. You and I must do that. Maybe in church life, maybe in family life, maybe a single person, in relationship with our friends. It's not easy to forget the failures of the past. Hurts, disappointments. We're scared about what tomorrow holds, but we must trust God now. It's this poem. I was regretting the past, I was fearing the future. Suddenly my Lord was speaking. My name is I Am, he said. He paused, I waited, he continued. When you live in the past, with its mistakes, its regrets, it is hard. I am not there. My name is not I was. When you live in the future with its problems, its fears, it is hard. I am not there. My name is not I will be. When you live in this moment, it is not hard. I am here. My name is I am. And just then, tragedy struck. When it seemed to be going so well, when life looked a little rosier, the boy became ill. Out of the blue, disaster. 6 weeks ago, I was on the New York Underground, middle of the day, dangerous place even then at times, and suddenly this young boy gets onto the Underground. He's homeless. He's making his pitch for money. And as he makes his pitch, we all kind of shuffle in our newspapers, and then he stops and says this: "Folks, you look tidy and good and fine. You've got nice suits on, but you must remember this," he said. "Anything can happen to anybody. Anything can happen to anybody." And he's right. And out of this little home then in which things were going so well, suddenly comes this incredible disaster. How are they going to handle this? How is it going to be? The dream is over. The oil has been each day. The flour has never failed, but the boy is dead. Yogi Berra, not the cartoon character, the cartoon character was named after him, was a catcher with the New York Yankees. He wore shirt number 6. The legend Joe DiMaggio wore shirt number 5. And Yogi Berra had seen it all. And at times his team would be losing, people would be leaving the stadium, the place would be emptying, and they'd say to him, "Yogan, we've lost again." And time again he'd seen the thing turned around, and he'd say this: "It's not over till it's over. It's not over till it's over." And suddenly the man of God is carrying the dead boy up the stairs of that house. The man of God looking to heaven with this woman's boy in his arms. She only had the son, and he is dead in his arms. Think of it, the man of God climbing slowly up the stairs of the house of despair. If I could put any caption underneath that picture, it would be this: him whispering under his breath, "It's not over till it's over." He served the God of Resurrection Sunday, the one who burst into space and time and history, the one who could scream out in the hills of Palestine, "Lazarus, come out now," who could tell death, "You must go now." The one who, when he was pinned with nails to wood, could say to death, "You must come now," and give up his spirit. The one who could say, "Nobody takes my life from me." And Elijah serves a God like that, and as he goes up the stairs with a dead boy in his arms, I could almost imagine him saying under his breath, against all the principalities of hell, "It's not over till it's over." And one day it will be over. The passage there begins with no water and a small family facing hunger. But the Bible stretches forward to a day it describes like this: never again will they hunger. Never again will they thirst. For the Lamb at the center of the throne will be their shepherd. And he will lead them to springs of living water, and God will wipe away every tear from their eyes. Elijah said to the single-parent mom, "Don't be afraid." And God would say to you, whatever your situation, however dark, however much your heart is breaking right now, don't ever give up, will you? He would say to you, don't ever give up. Don't ever stop praying. I am the God who can give you back the years the locust has eaten. And folks, it's not over till it's over. Hallelujah.